The air in the apostate's kiss was a thick stew of synthetic smoke, spilled synthahol, and stale desperation. It coated my tongue, a familiar flavor. Two of Vaughn's boys had me pinned in a back booth, the cracked synth leather sticking to my jacket. The one on my left, Brute A, had chrome knuckles that gleamed oily in the low light. The one on my right, Brute B, just smiled a lot, showing teeth that were too clean for this part of the tangle, my part of the tangle. "Time's up, Sal," Brute B hummed, his smile never wavering. "Just another Tuesday. Another bad hand, another empty credit chit, another collection call." I was so tired of the repetition. My internal monologue was a flat, dull sigh. Threats, posturing, then the boring part with the pain. Get on with it. I looked past them, through the haze, at the card table I'd just fled, a monument to my own stupidity. I didn't feel fear. I felt nothing. Just a profound, bone-deep resignation. The universe was a rigged game, and I was perpetually on the wrong side of the table. Then he appeared, a disruption in the grimy pattern of the place. He stood beside our booth, utterly out of context, like a prime number in a bowl of alphabet soup. His suit was impossibly clean, a dark gray that seemed to absorb the light. Not a wrinkle, not a speck of dust. His posture was ramrod straight. "Pardon the intrusion," he said. His voice was calm, sterile, like a medical readout. "I believe I have a proposal for Mr. Salvatore here." Vaughn's boys tensed. Brute A shifted his weight, chrome knuckles making a soft grinding sound against the tabletop. "Buzz off, suit. This is official business." The man in gray didn't even look at him. His eyes, the color of a dead terminal screen, were fixed on me. "We represent the First Spire Bank," he continued, placing a datapad on the table. It glowed with a soft, inviting white light. "We have noted your outstanding financial obligations and your potential. We are prepared to absorb all of it, in full." I snorted, a faint puff of amusement in the void. "Right, and what's the interest rate? My soul? My firstborn?" Heard this one before. Some new model loan shark with a better marketing department. "Nothing so crude," the trader said, his lips barely moving. "We simply require a decade. A 10-year contractual claim on your abstract potential for positive circumstantial variance. Your luck, to use a vulgar term." The brutes looked confused. I just felt more tired. A cosmic pawn shop. Great. 10 years of bad luck for a clean slate. My luck was already circling the drain. It wasn't a deal, it was a fire sale. I was already living that life. "You pay Vaughn off, right now?" I asked, my voice a dull rasp. Instantly, I stared at the glowing datapad. My leg was starting to ache where one of Vaughn's enforcers had cracked it last year. The thought of 10 more years of this, of running and hiding, and this gnawing, empty feeling. What was the alternative? Another back alley beating, another debt to dig myself out of, deeper and deeper until the grave was the only hole left. The trader slid a stylus across the table. Just a simple biometric seal. Brute B finally spoke up, the smile tightening. Hey, we're not done here. The trader finally turned his head, an almost imperceptible movement. Your employer, Vorn, just received a credit transfer sufficient to cover this debt plus a substantial premium for his inconvenience, he stated. A moment later, a chime sounded from the brute's wrist comm. His smile vanished as he looked at the message. He grunted, then glanced at his partner. They both stood up. No goodbye. They just melted back into the filth of the den, suddenly someone else's problem. It was just me and the suit. My hand was shaking, not from fear, exhaustion. I picked up the stylus. The contract on the datapad was a shifting mass of incomprehensible legalese, a galaxy of fine print. I didn't read it. What was the point? The house always wins. I just pressed my thumb to the screen. A soft chime, a flash of white light. I felt a shift, a deep, cold hollowing. Not painful, just empty. As if a pilot light deep inside me had just been snuffed out. The trader retrieved his datapad. Pleasure doing business with you, Salvatore. The First Spire Bank wishes you a prosperous day. He turned and walked away, vanishing into the smoke as cleanly as he had arrived. I sat there in the sudden silence of the booth. My debts were gone. I was free. I felt nothing but a vast, profound, and deeply unsettling relief. A hollow victory. The story of my life. With Vorn's marker cleared, my credit chit was no longer a useless piece of plastic. It was a weapon. The bank had left me with a small float, seed capital, the trader's parting message had called it. Old habits die hard. The only way I knew how to turn a little into a lot was at a card table. I found a high-stakes game in the back of the seven-sided die, a cleaner joint where the debts were enforced with encrypted legal writs instead of chrome knuckles. Let's see if the magic works, or if I just sold a dead battery for scrap. The chips felt good in my hand, solid, real. The cards came. The first hand I won on a bluff. The second, a lucky river card gave me a straight. On the third hand, the dealer laid out the turn. I held 2 kings. Another king was on the board. I had a solid hand, but a heavy betting chromer across the table was radiating confidence. My turn. The final card flipped. A 4th king. Impossible odds. The table went silent. 4 kings. Figures. I raked in the mountain of chips with a practiced motion, my face a stony mask. The chromer swore under his breath, his cybernetic eye whirring as it calculated his losses. A detached, clinical victory. I noted it, filed it away. Big win. Unexpected. Noted. That's when the screaming started. It came from the other side of the casino floor, near the refreshment dispensary. A shrill, mechanical shriek, followed by a wet, percussive crunch. Everyone's attention snapped towards the sound. I saw it immediately. A hulking servitor bot, one of the heavy lifter models used for hauling synthahol barrels, was spasming uncontrollably. One of its multi-jointed hydraulic arms, tipped with a massive claw, had slammed down through a table, crushing the torso of a patron who hadn't moved fast enough. Sparks showered from its torso as it twitched, feral and broken. I stood up, pocketing my winnings. Time to go before the enforcers locked the place down. Just my luck. As I turned, I stumbled, my boot catching on the leg of a chair I hadn't seen. I fell backwards, hitting the floor hard as something whipped past my face with a metallic shriek. A thick shard of steel, shorn from the malfunctioning bot's casing, embedded itself in the wall exactly where my head had been a second before. My heart hammered against my ribs. I lay there, stunned, the noise of the casino floor fading to a dull roar. That was close. My logical mind tried to process it. Tripped? Avoided shrapnel? Coincidence? Good one, even. The incident across the room was just another piece of data. Big, sharp bits, moves fast, noted. My survival was just a clumsy, random accident. I got to my feet, brushing myself off, the apathetic shell already reforming. But as I cashed out my winnings, an obscene amount for an hour's work, the incidents kept happening. A croupier's data slate overloaded, giving him a mild electric shock. A light fixture flickered and shorted out, raining harmless sparks on the table next to mine. A card shuffler jammed and spewed cards across the felt. Minor tragedies, little pockets of chaos. Each time, I was conveniently looking the other way, or had just stepped out of the way. Each time, I won another hand, my chip stack growing into a fortress. When I finally tried to leave, a security lockdown had been triggered by the berserk servitor. The blast doors hissed shut, trapping everyone inside. Everything always fails. I expected it, but the sheer inconvenience of it finally poked through my resignation. A hot flicker of irritation. Of course the exit's blocked. Win big, can't leave. Classic. I wasn't scared. I was annoyed. My grand escape from the tangle was on hold because some machine decided to redecorate. Just one more goddamn thing getting in my way. 2 hours. That's how long the lockdown at the seven-sided die lasted. 2 hours of listening to the low murmur of panicked gamblers and the occasional static-laced update from casino security. I spent it leaning against a wall, a mountain of credit chits heavy in my pocket, feeling the annoyance harden into a venomous, simmering rage. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I win, I leave. Simple. But the world, as usual, had to complicate things. When the blast doors finally retracted, I didn't wait. I pushed through the nervous crowd and hit the grimy streets of the tangle, heading straight for the central maglev station. This was it, the real escape. A one-way ticket to Proxima or Janus or anywhere that wasn't here. A place where nobody knew the name Sal, and my past was just a bad dream. The thought should have felt liberating, but my newfound fortune felt tainted, clinging to me like a bad smell. The station was a cavernous dome of rusting steel and flickering holoads, smelling of ozone and recycled air. I shoved past drone porters and off-world pilgrims, my eyes locked on the glowing ticket terminal. The price of a ticket was astronomical, but for the first time in my life, I could afford it. I could just walk away. I reached the front of the line, my heart, for the first time since signing that data pad, thumping with something other than dread. It was hope, ugly and unfamiliar. My turn. I stepped up to the terminal. One-way ticket, off-world transit, first available, I said to the automated teller. Destination? The synthesized voice chirped. Anywhere but here. As my hand reached for the payment slot, a maintenance worker on a gantry high above the station floor fumbled with a hydrospanner. I saw the glint of chrome as it slipped from his grasp. Time seemed to stretch. A woman a few feet away screamed, but the spanner didn't hit anyone. It struck a junction box on the wall with a deafening crack, unleashing a supernova of blue sparks. The entire station plunged into darkness. The roaring hum of the maglev tracks died with a sickening groan. A cacophony of panicked shouts echoed in the massive space, and then the emergency lights kicked in, bathing everything in a strobing blood-red glare. Over the intercom, a panicked voice announced a catastrophic failure in the primary power grid. An indefinite, system-wide lockdown. Perfect. Just perfect. My bubble of not caring, the one thing I had left, had been violated. This force, this luck, wasn't just helping me win cards. It was actively trapping me here. It had followed me, intruding on the one clean escape I had ever earned. My internal monologue became a furious, silent rant. You had to do it, didn't you? Couldn't just let me walk away. Had to make a goddamn mess. For what? So I could save a few credits on a ticket that doesn't exist anymore? I was no longer a passive observer. I was a rat in a cage, and something was rattling the bars just to watch me jump. Trapped in the flickering darkness, surrounded by the moans of the injured and the frightened cries of people who were only here because the system decided to short-circuit, I felt the truth settle over me. I wasn't trapped with them. They were trapped with me. My good fortune was a plague, and this station was its quarantine zone. My ticket out had just become the price of everyone else's imprisonment. I gripped the useless credit chits in my pocket, the smooth plastic feeling slick and vile. For the first time, I felt the cold, sharp hook of the contract buried deep in my soul, and it started to pull. The station lockdown dragged on. The red emergency strobes painted the same horrifying scenes over and over. A mother comforting a crying child, a medic trying to stabilize an old man who'd fallen in the panic, enforcers shouting orders that no one followed. It was a pattern. My win at the casino, the bot malfunctioning, my survival, the other guy's death, my attempt to escape, this city-wide paralysis. 1 + 1 equals a dead guy. Simple math. But who's doing the calculating? My mind, for the first time in years, shifted from reactive anger to a grim, proactive gear. The apathy was useless now. Annoyance was a luxury. I needed answers. What are you? Where did you come from? What's your weakness? Everyone's got one. There was only one place in the tangle to get answers to questions you weren't supposed to ask. I had to go back to the apostate's kiss. Slipping out of the maglev station during the chaos was easy. The journey back through the district's grimy arteries was not. Every step was fraught with a low-grade hum of dread. I braced myself for another coincidence, but the trip was unnervingly smooth. The den was quieter than when I'd left it. I found Ghost, a data haunter who operated out of a booth that smelled of burnt ozone and recycled synth noodles. His face was a pale, dispassionate mask illuminated by the glow of the half-dozen screens built into his table. His eyes were milky white, cybernetics that let him see the deep data of the net. "Sal," he hissed, not looking up from his work. "Crawling back already?" "I need info," I said, sliding a fat credit chit across the table, enough to make him pay attention. First Spire Bank. Ghost's fingers froze over a glowing keyboard. He finally turned his milky eyes toward me. Heavy query. That's a name for hushed tones, Sal. The kind of data that bites back. Just find it, I snapped. My cynicism a brittle shield against the crawling fear. I need to know what I signed. He took the chit. His fingers became a blur, dancing across light and shadow. Encrypted networks unfolded on his screens, streams of corrupted code and firewall data nodes. He muttered to himself, navigating the digital ether. Finance sector archives, nothing. Corporate registry, firewalled. Deeper then. Off-grid chatter, occult forums. Ah, here we go. He pointed a trembling finger at a block of ancient-looking text. It wasn't a corporate prospectus. It was a page from some forgotten grimoire, filled with diagrams of impossible geometry and dire warnings. The name was there, translated from a dozen dead languages. The Bank of the First Spire, the Lenders of Fate, the Grand Arbitrageurs. It's not a financial institution, Sal, Ghost whispered, his voice thin with awe and terror. It's older. It's a conceptual entity. It doesn't trade in credits. It trades in abstracts, hope, despair, causality. His voice dropped even lower. Potential. They don't have employees. They have agents of acquisition. The words hit me like a physical blow. The sterile man in the gray suit wasn't a salesman. The shield of sarcasm I'd hidden behind for years felt thin as paper. Ghost kept scrolling, pulling up fragmented eyewitness accounts, paranoid ravings, and deathbed confessions. Stories of artists who traded their future masterpieces for a single moment of inspiration and were found as empty husks. Of generals who sold their potential for defeat and won a war, only to watch their world crumble into civil unrest. Always a price, never a discount. My own deal was laid bare. 10 years of good fortune. It wasn't just bad luck for me that I'd sold. I had sold the potential for my luck to exist on its own. Now, for me to succeed, the universe required a corresponding failure. My luck was a loan drawn from the misfortune of others. The cynical analysis gave way. Dread, pure and cold as interstellar space, filled the void. The clipped sentences returned to my mind, not from indifference, but from shock. Oh, so that's what it is? That's not good. I stumbled out of the apostate's kiss, Ghost's terrified whispers echoing in my ears. Conceptual entity, agents of acquisition, lenders of fate. The words were meaningless jargon until you saw the bodies. I saw the bodies. I was starting to realize I was the one making them. My cynicism, my jaded understanding of a cruel world, was no longer a comforting blanket of apathy. It was the only lens I had to analyze the predator that now owned my leash. I headed for my hab unit, a closet-sized room in a tenement stack that vibrated with the thrum of 1,000 miserable lives. I needed to think, to connect the patterns. It wasn't random. Every lucky break for me was a direct, calculated debit from someone else's life. The scale had to be balanced. He was waiting for me in the corridor outside my door. The man in the gray suit, the agent of acquisition. His prim, polite demeanor from the gambling den was gone. His face was a placid mask of indifference, the look of a functionary reviewing an account ledger. The cold dread in my gut solidified into a knot of ice. "Salvatore," he said, his voice flat. It wasn't a greeting, it was an identification. "What do you want?" I asked, my own voice tight. My hand hovered near my sidearm, a foolish, vestigial instinct. What was a kinetic slug going to do to a concept? "A routine audit," the agent replied, falling into step beside me as I instinctively backed away. "Your account has been flagged for unusually high-volume activity. It is drawing significant attention." He tilted his head slightly. "We prefer our acquisitions to be subtle. The interest payments you are generating are becoming disruptive." Interest payments. The word hung in the air. The crushed patron, the station blackout, the trail of minor catastrophes. Those were the interest payments on my luck. "So you're here to collect," I snarled. "On the contrary, I am here to observe, to ensure the investment remains secure." As we stood there in the dimly lit hall, a low groan echoed from the pipes running along the ceiling. A pressure conduit. I'd walked this hall 1,000 times. I knew the sounds of the building, the groans of its tired machinery. But this groan was different, sharper, higher-pitched. My mind, now hyper-aware, screamed a warning. I saw a rust-colored stain on the conduit swell outwards. I saw a rivet head begin to vibrate. The agent's presence, the stressed metal, a causal link. The sentences were lengthening in my head, forging connections in the fire of panic. It's not just my luck. He amplifies it. He's a catalyst. I dove to the side, covering my head, just as the conduit exploded. An ear-splitting roar, a flash of superheated steam and scalding water. Shrapnel from the burst pipe shredded the wall where I'd been standing. Screams erupted from the neighboring hab units as the blast breached their walls. I scrambled back, my skin stinging from the heat, my ears ringing. I was completely unharmed, untouched, lucky. The agent of acquisition hadn't moved. The steam swirled around him, not seeming to touch his perfect gray suit. He looked down the hallway at the damage, at the figures writhing and crying out from their ruined homes. His expression was one of mild disapproval, as if I had scuffed the floor in a pristine lobby. "You see," he said, turning his dead screen eyes back to me, "an asset this volatile requires oversight." The message was clear. I was no longer a client. I was an investment, a piece of metaphysical stock. And the auditor had arrived to follow me, to shadow my every move, ensuring the principal was protected while the interest, the suffering, was collected with brutal efficiency. I was no longer just hunted by my past. I was now actively haunted by my future, a walking, talking natural disaster with a chaperone. The auditor was a shadow I couldn't shake. His presence was a constant, low-frequency hum at the edge of my senses, a promise of imminent catastrophe. A simple trip to buy food from a street vendor ended with the vendor's fusion grill overloading, spraying hot grease across 3 other customers. I, of course, had just stepped back to avoid a puddle. I had to get away from him, away from myself. There was only one person I could think of, Ilara, an old contact from a life I'd tried to forget back when I ran contraband instead of just gambling debts. She was a null warden, a fringe technician who built things the mainstream corporations said were impossible. Devices to block esoteric energies, nullify strange frequencies, create pockets of silence in a noisy universe. Her workshop was hidden in the substructure of the tangle, insulated by layers of defunct machinery and forgotten conduits. The final door was a massive slab of lead-lined steel. I hammered on it, my panic a physical taste in my mouth. It hissed open, revealing Ilara, wiping grease from her hands with a rag. She was sharp, wiry, with eyes that saw the universe as a circuit diagram to be tinkered with. "Sal," she said, her voice dry, "you look like you've seen a ghost." "Something worse," I managed, pushing past her into the workshop. The change was immediate. The constant, thrumming dread that had been my companion since I'd signed the contract vanished. The air was clean, smelling only of solder, hot metal, and ozone. It was a clean smell, blessedly normal. The oppressive weight of the auditor's observation was gone. For the first time in days, I felt like I was alone in my own head. I watched as Ilara, preoccupied, reached for a diagnostic tool on a high shelf. It slipped from her fingers. I flinched, bracing for the inevitable explosion or system failure. The tool simply clattered harmlessly to the floor. Ilara swore, bent down, and picked it up. A normal accident. A dropped tool was just a dropped tool. I nearly wept with relief. "A steel door? Great. Bet the hinges are rust," my old cynical voice tried to whisper, but it had no conviction. The raw, desperate need for this to be real was too strong. I laid it all out for her. The bank, the agent, the interest payments. I pushed a stack of my blood-soaked credit chits across her workbench. "I need you to get this thing off me. Sever the connection, permanently." Ilara listened, her skeptical expression slowly morphing into one of intense academic curiosity. She walked around me, holding a complex-looking sensor, its needles twitching erratically. "There's something," she muttered, intrigued. "A parasitic waveform latched onto your biosignature, resonating with ambient probability. Fascinating and horrifying." She accepted the job. For the next few days, her workshop was my sanctuary, a pocket of blessed silence. I helped her where I could, fetching components, calibrating emitters. For the first time since this started, I was doing something, not just reacting. Lead-lined walls. Cute. Won't work, the cynic in me would mutter late at night. This is just a temporary reprieve, a new brand of false hope. Yet, my actions betrayed my thoughts. I invested myself in her work. I held the psychic dampeners as she bolted them into a portable harness. I watched the power levels on the null field generator rise, its hum a song of liberation. As the device neared completion, a small, quiet, and incredibly dangerous thought surfaced in the silence of my mind. This might actually work. We might make it. It was the first truly positive thought I'd allowed myself. It felt fragile, like a soap bubble. It made me vulnerable. But in the quiet hum of Alara's workshop, I let myself believe in it. The nullifier was a heavy, utilitarian harness of copper coils, resonating crystals, and glowing power conduits. Alara tightened the last clamp, her face lit by the device's soft blue hum. "All right, Sal, the theory is sound. This should generate a conceptual static field," she explained, her eyes bright with the thrill of the challenge. "It won't destroy the connection, but it should scramble it so badly your bank can't find you, make you invisible to them." The fragile bubble of hope inside me felt like it was about to float free. I nodded, a genuine, grateful smile pulling at my lips. "Alara, it is a clever theory." The voice was not Ilara's. It was the agent's, flat, sterile, and right behind me. I spun around. He was just there, inside the shielded, lead-lined, warded room, standing by the door as if he'd been there all along. The nullifier harness on my chest suddenly felt like a tombstone. Alara gasped, her hand flying to a plasma cutter on her workbench. "A physical device cannot block a conceptual contract, Salvatore. The agreement is not with your body. It is with your existence. You are trying to use a firewall to block a ghost." The hum of the generator beside us began to change, rising in pitch. The blue lights on my harness flickered, turning a violent violet. "What's happening?" I choked out, clawing at the clamps. "The device is straining," Alara shouted over the rising shriek. Your luck! It's fighting the null field! It's treating the field as an obstacle to be overcome!" My good fortune! The very thing I was trying to escape was actively working to protect its own existence by destroying my only means of fighting it. The generator began to shake violently, bolts screaming as they were torn from the floor. "The asset must be protected," the agent said with an air of finality. It was the last thing I heard before the world dissolved into light and noise. The null-field generator overloaded. The blast threw me across the room like a doll, my back slamming into the far wall. The world turned white, then black. When consciousness returned in ragged, agonizing waves, it was to the smell of burning metal and the sharp, coppery tang of blood. The workshop was a ruin of twisted metal and shattered dreams. My harness was a smoking, blackened wreck, but I was alive. A few burns, a ringing in my ears, but alive. My eyes searched frantically through the wreckage. A massive ceiling beam, shaken loose by the explosion, had fallen right where I had been standing. The blast, however, had, luckily, thrown me clear, saving my life. And then I saw it. The same falling beam that my luck had saved me from had landed directly on Ilara's workbench. On Alara. My cynical shield, my carefully constructed walls, my apathy, it all shattered. It didn't just crack, it vaporized, leaving nothing but the raw, screaming nerve beneath. This wasn't a stranger on the other side of a casino. This wasn't a faceless casualty in a station lockdown. This was Alara. She had tried to help me. She had believed she could win. I let her believe it. I had believed it too. That hope, that one fragile moment of belief, was what made this unbearable. A single, guttural scream tore itself from my throat. It wasn't a sound of fear, but of pure, unfiltered rage. Rage at the agent, at the bank, at the universe, but mostly a black, burning, self-devouring rage at the cage of good luck that kept me safe by killing everyone who got close. My past was a litany of small betrayals to get by. I see now that this was just the final, grandest version. I had made my deal. Ilara just paid the price. The curtain starts to drop. The silence in the ruined workshop was heavier than the smoke-filled air. The only sounds were the drip of leaking pipes and the faint electrical fizzing from the wrecked generator. Ilara was gone. My hope was gone. My cynicism felt like a childish affectation I could no longer afford. All the sarcasm and witty detachment had been burned away in the blast, and what was left was a core of something cold, hard, and terrifyingly clear. The agent of acquisition stood in the one corner of the room untouched by the explosion. His gray suit was still immaculate. He looked at the wreckage, then at me, with the dispassionate air of an actuary calculating a loss. Your designated ancillary associate has been liquidated. An unfortunate but predictable outcome of resisting the terms of your agreement. We will be adding the cost of this intervention to your principal. He paused, which, I should mention, is coming due. The initial term of the loan was simply a grace period. Your final payment is scheduled for collection. Final payment. My voice was a gravelly whisper. What is it? Your entire existence, Salvatore. A full and final acquisition of the asset. He was going to unmake me, erase me from the universe like a bad debt. In the past, that thought might have brought a kind of weary relief. Now, it was unacceptable. Not because I cherished my miserable life, but because my end would mean they would win. The house would collect, write off the damages, and find another desperate soul to ruin. My mind, stripped of all its emotional baggage, began to work with a chilling new clarity. My internal monologue was no longer a rant or a lament. It was a series of logical steps. Can't sever the connection, proven. Can't block the connection, proven. The connection itself is the weapon they use against me. The asset must be protected. My luck, my curse, the thing that protected me at the cost of everyone else. I had been trying to get rid of it. That was the wrong move. An old gambler's axiom floated up from the dregs of my memory. If you can't beat the house, burn it down. The agent watched me, a flicker of something like curiosity in his dead eyes. He saw the shift. He saw the resignation die and something else being forged in its place. I'm not resisting the terms, I said, my voice low and steady. I pushed myself to my feet, ignoring the screaming pain in my back. I'm defaulting. I formulated the plan in an instant, a final, desperate gambit. A play so reckless, so catastrophic, that it would do more than just resist the contract. It would break it. If my luck was a leash, I wouldn't try to slip the collar. I would run so fast and so hard that I would hang the one holding it. What if the asset is placed in a position where protecting it becomes a logical paradox? I asked, thinking aloud. What if keeping me alive is more destructive than letting me die? The agent's placid expression remained, but I saw it, a subtle twitch, a recalculation, an error in the cosmic ledger. The contract is absolute, he said. The asset will be preserved until the moment of acquisition. Let's test that theory. A grim smile touching my lips for the first time. It was a horrible, joyless thing. I had nothing left to lose and only one thing left to do. My decision was made, irreversible as a tombstone. I would weaponize my good fortune. I was going to confront the bank not by running, but by forcing them to honor the terms of our deal so completely that it would shatter their very existence. The house was about to learn what happened when a gambler pushed all his chips in on a hand that could destroy the entire casino. My objective was singular and suicidal. The primary fusion core at the heart of the Tangle's understructure, the most unstable, heavily guarded, and dangerous piece of equipment in the entire district. It was the perfect place to make a final, paradoxical bet. Getting there should have been impossible. For me, it was terrifyingly easy. The internal monologue of a survivor, the one that screamed warnings and calculated risks, had gone silent. It was replaced by something else, something cold and purely tactical. The short, clipped sentences from the day I'd met the agent had returned, but their meaning was inverted. They were no longer signs of apathy. They were a catechism of life or death focus. Exit, North Corridor, 2 guards. As I approached the first checkpoint, my luck, amplified by the silent watching presence of the auditor behind me, began to clear the path. One of the guards, a heavy-set man with a drooping mustache, suddenly clutched his chest. He gasped, his face turned a ghastly shade of purple, and collapsed in a seizure. His partner, panicked, fumbled with his comm unit, screaming for a medical team. He never even saw me slip past. Guard down. Unfortunate. Path clear. I moved deeper into the restricted zone. The corridors were cleaner here, the air humming with the thrum of immense power. A laser grid security scanner blinked to life ahead of me, its red beams forming an impenetrable net. I didn't slow down. As I drew closer, a maintenance drone I hadn't even noticed whirred erratically overhead, its casing sparking. It dropped from the ceiling like a stone, crashing directly into the scanner's primary control panel. The system shorted out with a deafening fizz. The laser grid vanished. Scanner reads, System overload. Door sparks. Proceed. Every step forward was a step through a storm of misfortune for others. A pressure valve that had been stable for 20 years chose this exact moment to rupture, its cloud of steam providing perfect cover. A security patrol heading my way was rerouted by a sudden fire alarm, false, of course, in a different sector. I didn't question it. I didn't feel remorse. I just moved. Each lucky break was a paving stone on the road to my final destination, and each one was mortared with someone else's pain. The trail of chaos in my wake was a testament to the power I now wielded. I was the eye of a hurricane, an island of calm survival in a sea of escalating disaster. I didn't have to fight. I just had to walk, and the world would warp and break to ensure my passage was smooth. Finally, I reached the last obstacle, a tri-steel blast door, 3 feet thick, sealing the entrance to the fusion core's control room. It was locked down tight, its magnetic bolts humming with power. A dead end. I stood before it, and for a fleeting moment, I thought the streak was over. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic clink, clink, clink from within the door's mechanism. One of the primary locking arms, a piece of flawlessly engineered metal, had developed a microscopic stress fracture. At this precise moment, under the immense pressure of the maglocks, it snapped. The catastrophic mechanism failure sent a shudder through the door, and with a groan of tortured metal, the magnetic lock shorted. The door slid open just enough for a man to slip through. Blast door. Mechanism failure. Gap. I slipped inside, leaving a trail of injured personnel, system failures, and pure chaos behind me. Every light had turned green. The house was giving me everything I wanted, leading me right to the heart of the table, never realizing that my plan wasn't to win the hand, but to burn the cards. The control room was a cathedral of power. The air itself thrummed, vibrating in my bones. In the center of the chamber, behind a thick pane of reinforced plexiglass, the fusion core pulsed with the light of a captive star, a miniature sun held in check by magnetic containment fields. A network of pipes and conduits snaked from it, channeling its unimaginable energy to the entire district. This was the heart of the tangle, and I was about to give it a heart attack. The agent of acquisition materialized in front of the main console, blocking my path. His gray suit was a void in the brilliant light of the core. There was no disapproval on his face now. There was nothing, just an absolute conceptual finality. He was here to stop me. The asset cannot be permitted to compromise itself, he stated, his voice the sound of a closing ledger. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. This wasn't a fight of fists or weapons. It was a battle of principles, of contract versus chaos. My internal monologue had ceased. My thoughts were stripped down to primal instinct, single, sharp commands that guided my actions. Console, access, purge. I walked toward the emergency purge valve, a large red lever set into a reinforced console. Pulling it would vent the core's plasma directly into the superstructure, an act of suicidal, city-killing madness. The agent moved to intercept me, his form blurring, but my luck intervened. A ceiling panel, shaken loose by the earlier structural groans, chose that moment to fall, forcing him to sidestep. It gave me the second I needed. My hand closed around the cool, heavy metal of the purge valve. It is a logical certainty that this action will result in your immediate annihilation, the agent said, his voice laced with the first hint of something other than indifference. It was conflict. Preserving you in this circumstance is a physical impossibility. I am a gambler, I rasped, turning to face him, my hand still gripping the lever. My heart was a cold, steady drum. I've made a bad deal, and now I'm betting everything I have left on a single, impossible hand. I looked him right in his dead screen eyes. I bet that I can pull this lever and survive. A paradox, a bomb made of logic. The agent was bound by the contract. He had to protect his investment, my life. But physics was bound by its own laws. It dictated that proximity to a fusion core purge meant vaporization. The terms of his reality and the terms of my contract were now mutually exclusive. The unstoppable force of my luck versus the immovable object of reality. Your wager is not accepted, the agent said, taking a step forward. Too late, the bet's on the table, I grunted, and with the last of my strength, I pulled the lever down. Now, lever, brace. The alarms shrieked, a single world-ending tone. A cascade of plasma, hotter than the sun, erupted from the core. But it didn't incinerate me. The agent, its expression for the first time, frozen in something like horror, was forced to act. It poured its own cosmic power, its own reality-bending essence, into ensuring my impossible survival. I felt a bubble of warped space envelop me, a cocoon of absolute safety, even as the world around me was unmade. Through the shimmering field, I saw the agent begin to unravel. The paradox was tearing him apart. He couldn't reconcile his primary directive, preserve the asset, with the fundamental laws he was being forced to break. His form flickered, corrupted like a bad data stream. The gray suit bled into colors that had no name. His features smeared across reality. He was being erased by his own inflexible rules. He screamed, but it was a sound of pure static, of a program crashing. Then he imploded, collapsing into a point of non-existence that left a lingering silence. The cocoon of my luck held for a second longer, a final, violent act of self-preservation. It saved me from the initial blast, shunting my body through space and structure with brutal force, and then, with its purpose fulfilled and its master erased, it vanished. The connection was severed. My protection was gone. And reality, hot and hard and unforgiving, came rushing back in. Consciousness came back in jagged pieces, like shards of broken glass. The first thing I registered was the screaming. A high, incessant shriek that seemed to come from everywhere at once, the station's emergency alarms. The second thing was the pain. My body was a roadmap of agony, each nerve ending a siren of its own. I was lying in a debris-strewn corridor far from the core chamber, the air thick with concrete dust and the acrid smell of ozone. The station lights were dead, the only illumination coming from sparking wires that cast spastic shadows on the wreckage. Slowly, carefully, I tried to catalog the damage. The adrenaline had faded, and my internal monologue returned, heavy and slow, a tired man taking inventory after a war. Left leg, broken. Compound fracture by the feel of it. Ribs, cracked at least. Burns, extensive. My clothes were shredded, my skin underneath a raw, blistered mess. But I was alive, and I was alone. I closed my eyes for a moment, listening past the alarms. I listened for the hum, the low-frequency thrum of the agent's presence that had become the background noise to my life. I listened for the strange, prescient whisper of my luck, the instinct that told me when to duck and when to step aside. There was nothing, just a profound, deafening silence in the space where the connection used to be. The metaphysical tether to the First Spire Bank was gone. I had won. I had defaulted on reality itself. I coughed, a dry, rattling sound that sent a jolt of pain through my chest. The relief was a hollow, aching thing. I had survived, but I was stripped bare. I was just Sal again, mortal, vulnerable, and a long way from a medic. As I lay there, trying to muster the strength to move, a small piece of metal trim, shaken loose from the ceiling by the ongoing structural groans, detached and fell. It was a minor thing, a piece of debris no bigger than my hand. Before, it would have miraculously missed me. It would have clattered to the floor a foot to my left, or a gust of wind from a ruptured vent would have nudged it harmlessly to the right. My luck would have intervened. Now there was no intervention. It tumbled end over end and clipped the side of my head. The impact wasn't enough to kill me, but it was sharp and real. I felt the skin split, felt a warm trickle of blood run down my temple and into my eye. The pain was small, almost insignificant compared to the rest of my injuries, but its meaning was monumental. I was unlucky again. The falling rubble, the small cut, the honest, stupid pain of it. It was the most terrifying and beautiful thing I had ever experienced. The universe no longer cared enough to save me. I was on my own. The alarms kept screaming, the dust kept settling, and I was just another piece of wreckage in a ruined world, bleeding from a fresh, unlucky wound. The weight of what I'd done and what I'd lost settled over me, heavier than any collapsed ceiling. Weeks later, the screaming of the alarms had been replaced by the quiet beeps and low hums of a charity medbay. The air smelled of antiseptic and cheap nutrient paste. My left leg was encased in a crude plaster cast, propped up on a pillow, a constant dull ache that served as a souvenir of my victory. The burns had scarred over, tight and pink. I was a patchwork of my own bad decisions. The new normal was quiet. There were no more convenient accidents, no more catastrophic coincidences. Life had returned to its natural state of mundane, random cruelty. A medical drone would malfunction and administer the wrong dosage to a patient 2 beds down. A food dispenser would short-circuit. These things happened, but they no longer orbited me. I was just another face in the crowd of the miserable and the unlucky. The silence where my luck used to be was still vast, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was slowly being filled by the quiet rhythm of my own breathing, the beat of my own heart. An old man named Reese, a former asteroid miner with dust-choked lungs, was my ward mate. He dealt a deck of worn plastic playing cards for a game of Tangle Hold'em, the stakes a spoonful of the day's synth soup. "You in, Sal?" he rasped, his voice a gravelly whisper. For a moment, the old instincts recoiled. The cards felt alien in my hand, artifacts from another life. But this wasn't the apostate's kiss. There was no cosmic entity watching, no conceptual bill to be paid. This was just a game. I nodded. "Deal me in." He dealt the cards. I picked them up. A 7 of rusted spades, a 2 of faded clubs. The worst starting hand in the game. Useless. A guaranteed loser. And I smiled. It was a real smile. A small, tired, cracked thing. But it was mine. It was the profound relief of a random draw. There was no metaphysical reason for this terrible hand, no cosmic balancing of the scales. It was just simple, honest misfortune. It was a hand I could fold without bringing the whole damn ceiling down. I threw the cards into the center of the cot that served as our table. I'm out. Riss grunted, scooping up my imagined bet. I would forever carry the scars, the ghost of Ilara's workshop, the memory of a patron crushed beneath a bot, the faces in the terrified crowd at the maglev station. Those were debts of a different kind, debts I would pay off for the rest of my days in quiet, grim vigilance. I no longer looked at the world with the detached futility of a man who believed the game was rigged. I saw it now with the weary, watchful eyes of a survivor who knew intimately what lurked in the fine print. My purpose was no longer a mission. It was a state of being. I was no longer a gambler chasing a score that was never enough. I was just a man who now understood the real, terrifying cost of a winning hand. I had sold my luck, and in buying it back with blood and fire, I had finally been set free.